Thomas and Friends Season 9 was released on the 4th of September 2005 in the US and the 5th of September 2005 in the UK. The series was produced by Simon Spencer, directed by Steve Asquith, narrated by Michael Angeles in the UK and Michael Brandon in the US, and the music was composed by Robert Hartshorn. This series was released during the 60th anniversary of the Railway series. The series was released around the time that Hit Entertainment had started to put themselves up for sale because of straining toy firms. So the private equity investment group, Apax Partners, decided to purchase Hit to save them from possibly going under. This series is notable as it's the first time we're introduced to Sharon Miller, who will become heavily involved in the Thomas and Friends franchise going forward. According to Sam Barlow, in an alleged attempt to maintain the literary qualities of the show, Sharon Miller started incorporating things that became very well known for her tenure, such as alliteration, rhyming speech, and a three-strike formula. It's also the first season that there isn't really a lot of mention of the drivers or firemen or any of the railway crew, allegedly because of the limited expressiveness of the human models. Now, unlike Season 8, they actually introduced new characters in this season. These characters included Molly, Mighty Mac, Neville, Proteus, and Dennis. We also had the return of the narrow gauge engines, so we got a lot of new sets as well to explore. My thoughts on Season 9 are that it's not bad, but also not great. A series that you can watch perfectly comfortably. You can enjoy some of the things that are going on. There are some really great episodes, but at the same time there are also some really bad episodes. Sadly, this is when things start to get a bit more formulaic when it comes to the series going forward. And because we all know what's going to happen with the franchise going forward, it does make it harder to watch these seasons on repeat viewings. Mainly because we know it's going to be same old as we go on. So I'm not going to waste everybody's time, and we're going to dive right into this ranking of Thomas and Friends Season 9. Once again, these are all my own personal opinions. Your list will probably be different than mine, and it's the one thing that makes the Thomas fandom so unique. Let me know down in those comments how you would rank Thomas and Friends Season 9. All I ask is that you be respectful, and above all, enjoy the video. Okay, let's dive in. Number 26, Skarloey the Brave. Written by Paul Larson, Skarloey proves to be a daredevil when he rides up the incline to show how brave he is. Honestly, even reading that tagline just boils my blood. It sums up everything that is wrong with Skarloey as a character, and how badly wrong we were that we thought we were getting the narrow gauge engines of old back in this era of Thomas and Friends. Seeing how he acts, especially on that bloody incline, it's so annoying. Because you can't help but think about the Skarloey of old, and then you compare him to this trash. It's just horrible. No one likes to see beloved characters getting absolutely, pardon my French, bastardized. But Skarloey was just that. I know that there's talk about how this episode could be seen as a prequel episode to Skarloey in his younger days, because even in the Railway series book, Skarloey when he was younger was a total prick. But it requires some major surgery to make that work, and the damage is done. Number 25, Saving Edward. Written by James Mason, Edward is feeling wheezy and cannot take his train, causing him to fear he will be scrapped. Speaking of older characters that get absolutely shafted, if you've watched my top 10 worst episodes video in Season 9, you'll notice that there's been a switcheroo here. That Skarloey the Brave is at the bottom, and Saving Edward is now second from bottom. Now why is that? And it's because of, ironically, Thomas. Thomas in this episode is actually really strong, and shows a fighting spirit for Edward to stand up for him and help him when he can't help himself. And that is pretty heartwarming. But when you see how much damage is being done to Edward as a character in this season, flip-flopping from being this old, weak and pathetic character in this episode to not a very nice character in another couple of episodes that we'll get to, it's really jarring for the audience and anybody who is a fan of Railway series or classic series Edward. Again, we're trying to treat this maybe as a completely different continuity, a separate timeline, but it still links into previous lore for Thomas because it's part of a model series. So seeing Edward as this old, frail, pathetic loser isn't good at all. Number 24, Thomas and the Birthday Picnic. Written by Sharon Miller, Thomas tries to find a perfect special picnic place for the Fat Controller's mother, Dowager Hat, who is having her birthday party. Oh, this episode. It drives home the point of why I am not a big fan of the human characters. I don't like to see the human characters replaced in Thomas and Friends or taken out entirely. That's not what I mean. You've heard me talk about human characters before in this season, and I've not been the biggest fan. But they are essential to the running of the railway. We should have the drivers and firemen included, but they're not. We should have allusions to signalmen, but there's none, aside from the fact that sometimes they say the signal dropped. It's the signalman that controls it. But this episode really makes me hate Sir Topham Hatt and, to an extent, Dowager Hatt as well. Dowager Hatt doesn't really have much to do in this, but she comes across as just bitter old woman. That's not right, especially because we know how they are able to do Dowager Hatt some justice in the later seasons. And Sir Topham Hatt just seems like a complete brat, just constantly yelling at Thomas because he's the one that can't find any special locations for his mum. No, let's get this right, buddy. You're the controller of the railway. It's your mum's birthday party. You're the one that needs to decide where you're going to go, what you're going to do, and how you're going to try and make it a good birthday for your mum. In a way, that would probably have been a better episode. People liked the season 5 episode where Sir Topham Hatt was in more of a prominent role and was trying to be a good husband. Why not try and rewrite this episode so you can see that Topham is trying to be a good son? But he's got these plans ready for his mum's birthday party, but needs Thomas to take her to certain locations that he's planned. Goes to first location, something bad's happened that doesn't look good. Not to worry, he has a backup plan. Go to that location. It's not to worry, we have a third plan. So thus completing the 3-strike formula that Sharon Miller is going for. That one's the one that just ruins everything. Topham sends Thomas away. He's feeling like a bad son because he's not been able to do anything nice for his mum. And then you could have the ending as it was, where they kind of come together and create this special moment for Dowager Hatt. I think that's a much better rewrite than what we got, because what we got was crap. Number 23, Toby Feels Left Out. Written by Simon A. Brown, the Sodor Museum is being opened and Toby is worried he will be put in it. So he tries to work hard to prove how really useful he is. And we come to the next old character assassination, and one that they never attempt any recovery with, even as the series goes on. And this is Toby. He now becomes poor old worried Toby in every guise that he's in, which is horrible considering what the character was like in the Railway series and the Classic series. That's OG proper Toby. This is a hot mess. It's certainly not in Toby's nature to run away from problems, thinking that he's going to be put in a museum, so he decides to do a runner every time the Fat Controller speaks to him. Even if it was classic era Toby, and he had those worries that maybe he was going to get put in the museum, he'd be upfront about it with Sir Topham. It's like they took that one clip of Toby in his debut episodes in season 1, where when his line closed down he said, "Nobody wants me," and trundled off unhappily to sleep, and made that his entire core personality for every series from season 8 onwards. And you also notice that at the end, where it turns out nothing bad's happened, you know, Syfy's cowcatcher's getting absolutely destroyed, and he's going to be taking the special train, Henrietta ain't there. Toby and Henrietta is like tea and biscuits. You can't have one without the other. And it's not like Henrietta isn't there, because we see her in another episode. Toby is pulling Henrietta, so we know that she is still there. There's no explanation as to why she's not being used. This episode is just extremely annoying. Number 22, Thomas and the Rainbow. Written by Abby Grant, Thomas finds a rainbow in the sky and tries to find what lies at the end of it. Spoiler alert, what lies at the end of it is friendship. It's a good message for kids. I'm just a cynical old git. If my kids watched this episode, I would be like, "Oh, that's a nice message for them." My cynical old brain just goes, "Ugh, what a load of Okay, how does Thomas not know what a rainbow is? Even your target audience, they know what a rainbow is. And it's even more jarring now because Thomas doesn't even mention all of the colours of the rainbow. The storytelling is quite dumbed down, and the scene where Thomas has his accident and the engines all pass the message on to everybody, that is a bit filler, but I do like getting to see all of the different characters, like Bertie and Harold and Harvey. And I still can't believe this episode won an Emmy. Number 21, Rheneas and the Dinosaur. Written by Paul Larson, Rheneas tries to take a dinosaur skeleton to the transfer yards on his own, but realises that he would need Scarrowy's help to pull the skeleton. And we're 4 for 4, old engines that have been absolutely shafted by their character. Rheneas and Scarrowy, best friends. Yay! Kids' best friends, who are just childish and petty and jealous and all that rubbish. Hell no. We all know Scarrowy and Rheneas' relationship and friendship throughout the Railway series and the Classic era. They've known each other for years, they are old friends, so they are more comfortable and not prone to bouts of anger or pettiness. Rhaenys is such a petty bitch in this. Like with all the narrow gauge episodes, they always find a way to shoehorn Thomas in. And once again, they've done it again here. But it's Rhaenys' character that just really, really irks me. Not a fan. Number 20, Thomas tries his best. Written by James Mason, Thomas wants to go to a fun fair while he has to wait for Farmer McCall with his chickens. Another episode with Thomas and chickens. That could pretty much sum up my thoughts on this episode. And just like that description, it's generic because it's been done before, and the episode's kind of tropes around it are worn out. You know, like how James and Gordon are the instigators of Thomas's like reckless behaviour, and Thomas is like, okay, I'll do that, and then winds up in the, well, let's just say poo. I find I'm swearing more with this ranking, but it's because I'm just not a fan of how they're treating these characters as the series go on. And also, this seems to become a recurring thing as well during this era, that the nighttime scenes, they take the darkness very, very literally, to the point where you really can't see anything. For any normies that are watching this, think the final battle with the White Walkers in Season 8 of Game of Thrones. Number 19, Tuneful Toots. Written by Sharon Miller, Rusty often gets judged about his horn, and when he takes the brass band on a tour of the hills, it proves how special it can be. The Rusty paradox. I never realised this was this season around it. For any normies watching, I'll give you some detail here. In the classic era, Britt Allcroft didn't define Rusty's gender. Rusty wasn't male, Rusty wasn't female, which was seen as quite a progressive move. We get to season 9, and they try to flip Rusty to female. So some of the lines were redubbed as, she said, and things like that. And then they flip back and then make Rusty's gender male. They assign Rusty's gender proper, and, that's it. Rusty's male from here on out. The one thing I don't understand is why they had to define the gender at all. Just the little Diesel was perfectly fine. Didn't need gender assigned to it. I know most of the characters do, and I know in the Railway series book Rusty is male, but to me it seemed like a big fuss over nothing. That being said, this is where we also get another character assassination in terms of Peter Sam, because he's very rude, arrogant, a bit of a prick. And that's not what Peter Sam was in the classic series either. And it always seems like there's a bit of a stereotype with me that, if a brass band is going to be in an episode, I instantly think it's not going to be good. It was alright. It wasn't great. It was what it was. Number 18, Thomas and the New Engine. Written by Mark Seal, Thomas prejudices a new engine named Neville, but mistakenly thinks he is friends with Harry and Bert, and spreads rumours to the other engines. Yeah, remember the big lesson that they learned in calling all engines? Completely wiped out with this episode. Good news, kids, racism is back to being okay again. I know that it also shows that you shouldn't jump to conclusions and, spread anything because it can turn into Chinese whispers, which is essentially what happens with Thomas. He sees him with Harry and Bert, thinks that he's pally with them, then says one thing to James, then James says something to Edward says something to Percy says something to Emily, and throughout those Chinese whispers it gets worse and worse and worse. And speaking of Edward, character assassination number 2, where he is just a gossiping bitch. That's not Edward's character in the slightest. Edward would want to find out what was going on and make his own assumptions rather than following in with rumour and gossip. It makes me wonder why Neville even continued working on the Island of Sodor after this episode, because he has 3 lines of dialogue, he is constantly bullied by both Diesels and Steamies, and when he's hanging over that edge, I'm pretty sure he was probably just thinking, I could drop right now and nobody would give a damn. I think the positive point that I clung on to with this was when Neville was driving past with Annie and Clarabelle, you get a cameo of George the Steamroller, because he was at the site. We all know I like my cameos. That's really what I'm clinging on to here. Number 17, Thomas and the Golden Eagle. Written by Abby Grant, Thomas and Percy try to see a rare golden eagle. What point of the episode right there, summed up in one 10-word sentence. And it's basically Thomas just taking advantage of Percy so he can try and see the golden eagle. And Bertie is the person that gets to come in and tell him, the golden eagle's here. Yeah, go find golden eagle. But I like Bertie as a cameo. Cameos are what I'm really holding on to now for positive points, especially when the story is bland, weak. It's not good. Number 16, Thomas and the Statue. Written by Mark Seal, Thomas is chosen to take a statue, which he believes is of him, causing him to anger his friends. First point, Cranky's voice, very nasally, does not sound like Cranky at all. I mean, was this filmed in a different order? Because it feels like Michelangelo's tried to experiment with a new voice for Cranky. They said, no, go back to the old one, because the rest of his episodes that he's in is his normal voice. That's the only logical explanation I can think of. Once again, Edward is out of character, taking the huff way too easily with Thomas, but what I did like about this was Percy losing his rag at Thomas. It had some vibes of when he was at his most high-tempered in season 5, but the difference is this feels more like a toddler having a tantrum because it's been pushed to the limit, rather than someone who's just had enough of his crap and is trying to knock him down a peg or two. It's still nice to hear though, it's quite funny. But aside from that, all the characters are pretty petty and annoying. And then when I seen the statue unveiled, I had to do a double take to make sure Toby was definitely in the statue. It's because he's behind Sir Topham Hatt, at first you couldn't really see him. I don't get why they just didn't move the Fat Controller over a bit more so we could probably see Toby, because that's a bit of a dick move having him right in front of him. Number 15, Thomas's new trucks. Written by Paul Larson, Thomas is jealous when James gets new trucks. He soon gets his own, but they keep getting dirty. The main point that I like about this episode is the Thomas and James dynamic. They clearly see that there's something there with these two and they keep experimenting with that kind of one-upmanship with each other. The anything you can do, I can do better type of rivalry, except it's my trucks are better than yours. There was some nice camera work. I like my cameos, in this case Bill, Ben and Harvey, and I would say the story is okay. Number 14, Bold and Brave. Written by James Mason, Diesel tells Thomas about the curse of the cliffs, which make him worried. I've covered this in a couple of videos now, and the thing that I like about it most is that it's a summer setting on the island of Sodor, but it feels like a spooky episode, because Diesel has planted this little seed of doubt in Thomas's head, and it creates the spook factor, it creates the fear, and it adds to the tension that builds and builds throughout this episode. And that is also added by the superb music from Robert Hartshorn in this. It adds to the tension and the eerie vibe that they're going for. I know I said in the last entry that it was good to see Bill and Ben in a cameo role, but in this one it's nice to see one without the other, proving that they can do separate jobs on the island of Sodor, and showing that just because they're twins, they're not always joined at the hip. So as an episode, if you're just looking at it as a standard hit era episode, it's alright. But if you go for the bit more of the slightly unsettling episodes of Thomas and Friends, then I would say this one's up your street. Number 13, Thomas's Milkshake Muddle. Written by Mark Seal, Thomas is sent to deliver milk and butter for cake and ice cream for a summer party, but almost ruins it by rushing around too much. You know, most people actually credit this episode for one thing. This is where they found out how milk can become butter. And for a hit era standard episode, the story was quite inventive. I'm not saying it's great, but it's inventive. The one thing that would have made it better is if Thomas wasn't the lead character. We're in that era now, 10 episodes of the series alone where Thomas is just in the title of the episode. But it's an oversaturation of Thomas. But aside from that, pleasantly kills a few minutes of your time. Number 12, Flower Power. Written by Abby Grant, Diesel has to work with Thomas in Halloween, and his teasing spooks the number one engine. But Thomas gets payback at Diesel by covering himself in flour to dress up as a ghost. Solid Halloween episode. The Thomas and Diesel dynamic is something else that they're experimenting with throughout the hit era. They managed to do it successfully in season 8, and then they've done it successfully again in season 9. They just seem to bounce off each other so well. Diesel being the sneering bully type, and Thomas just trying to stand up for himself and get one up on him. Good formula, good combination. I think it could have been done as well with Percy in this era as well. I think Flower Power with Percy and Diesel would have actually been a better combination, especially with Percy being in this little tantrum phase that he's going on in this season. The effects that are used in this episode and the musical score by Robert Hartshorn, it just really adds to the spooky nature that they're going for. Number 11, Thomas and the Toy Shop. Written by James Mason, Thomas tries to deliver some toys as well as children to the new shop at Knapford during the Christmas season, but the load ends up being too heavy and he needs Henry's assistance. I think they were really trying to work on dynamics with Thomas throughout this era. We've had Thomas and James this season, Thomas and Edward, and in this one it's Thomas and Henry. And it's another very strong dynamic. The story is pretty strong, and we see Cranky again, but this time he's got more of his normal voice, so I'm quite happy with that. Number 10, Percy and the Oil Painting. Written by Abby Grant, a famous artist comes to paint a picture of the spirit of Sodor. Percy is chosen for the job, but the artist is not easily impressed. Luckily, Percy shows how proud of Sodor he is and gets a surprise in the end. The surprise is that he's the oil painting. Yeah, I'm getting spoiler alert heavy, aren't I? I love the voice that Angeles gives this artist. If I had money for every time I've met a creative that has this similar type of condescending, put down, manic depressive voice, I'd essentially be talking to myself. But the key thing that I really love about this, and a lot of people have said what this is the part that they like, is Percy going back. He puts that guy in his place, and good on him. And I like this rant compared to the other rant in Thomas and the Statue. This one feels different. It feels like he is standing up for not just Sodor, but essentially standing up for himself. You see that Percy really has pride in his identity by being on Sodor and wants this artist to know it. One thing I would like to know is who actually done like that little painting of Percy. You know, in real life, I know in the story that's the artist who's done the portrait of Percy, but I want to know who actually done it because that portrait is also really nice. But I think we can sum up the episode with one simple sentence. The Island of Sodor is beautiful, so there. Number 9, Emily Knows Best. Written by Mark Seal, Emily pretends to be a queen after delivering visitors to a ruined castle as an intention to help Percy. But this leads to causing confusion and delay. There's lots of good points in this episode. I now really like Emily's attitude because I love how it clashes with Toby. It brings the OG Toby back. Their little back and forth was fantastic to see. For just those brief seconds in this story, Toby was back. And it's great seeing Toby and Percy paired up together again, like the way they were in the Railway series. And then you get to see Mavis. Yes, she's had a crash, but it also adds another dynamic in there, because Percy and Toby both have a history with Mavis. The story was good, the character pairings worked, the dynamics were strong, and there was no sign of Thomas. Winner, winner, Sodor dinner. Number 8, Henry and the Flagpole. Written by Paul Larson, Henry fears that his favourite pine tree will be cut down to provide the flagpole for Callan Castle. So many Scottish-isms in this. The music, the castles. I know they're stereotypical kind of things for Scotland, but I just love seeing my country represented. It's great to see, and especially because Donald and Douglas aren't there. I know in the past I have said that, yep, Henry's an eco-warrior, that's him now, but with growth, maybe 2% on my part. At least they've kept the character consistent. He loves the forest, he wants to protect it. It's pretty noble. The cameo counting in here, we get a Salty cameo and we get a Trevor cameo. The story is good. The resolution around the flagpole is also very well done. I would say this is a solid Henry episode. Number 7, The Magic Lamp. Written by Sharon Miller, Peter Sam is told a story about a magical engine named Proteus and his magic lamp. He thinks the lamp is silly, but notices strange things during his evening job. Key gripe is Peter Sam's attitude in this. I mentioned it in another entry. This one, because he's front and centre, it's so glaringly obvious, and it just annoyed me. Everybody remembers this episode for one thing though, Proteus. He has maybe a 5 to 10 second shot in this, but he fascinated an entire generation of Thomas and Friends fans. And he fascinated me as well when I first watched it. I wanted to know more about Proteus. This is the episode where I really started to notice the alliteration and the rhyming speech, but I also really enjoyed the nighttime visuals. It wasn't too dark that you couldn't see, there was good fog effects, and the second I saw Harold the helicopter, I just had a beaming smile. Number 6, Keeping Up with James. Written by Abby Grant, James wants to finish his work first to pull a presents train for the Christmas season, but his impatience with Edward proves to be disastrous when they are assigned partners for the day. And something I noticed in this watch that I never noticed previously, when you see all their little snowplows that they've got, all of them have the colours of the engines painted on the sides of the snowplow. Like James's one is red, Henry's one is green, so they all seem like really nice snowplows, and Thomas still has his snowplow. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. James and Edward are always a good combination, even in some of the darkest of times, because their personalities always clash. The winter effects were good, the crash was solid. It's always good to see James fall from grace, get his comeuppance, and then have to learn a lesson. You just wish it would stick more. Well done. Number 5, Molly's Special Special. Written by Paul Larson, Thomas meets a yellow engine named Molly, and tries to help make her empty trucks look special so she can feel important. A character that I have talked about a couple of times and thought, missed opportunity with Molly. She's already been a victim of Sodor's toxic work environment, because Emily's made her feel like crap. So Thomas tries to do what he can to make her feel special. In turn, maybe goes a little bit too far, then makes her feel worse because the plan backfires, only for it to have its nice resolution at the end. This episode really did highlight that the Steam team was very much a clique dynamic. If you were new to the island, you had to go through a trial by fire with them, and if you didn't pass, you weren't accepted. But when it comes to Molly as a character, there was room for development. I like her design, so I enjoyed this episode, and I enjoyed the introduction of Molly. Number 4, Respect for Gordon. Written by James Mason, Gordon is not feeling so strong when he has trouble with his firebox. He begins bossing the others for respect, until he crashes into some jam tankers. Right, before everybody comes at me in the comment section for not putting Respect for Gordon at number 1, I'm not saying it's not a good episode. It's a good episode, it's a strong episode, a good Gordon episode. I just feel like it was crammed in. This had the potential of a 2-part story, and even felt like it when I watched it again. It felt like part 1 should have been everything up until he had his crash and then had to go and get repaired. Part 2 should have been when Henry and Emily take over Gordon's jobs and realise that it's harder than they thought to be Gordon. And you see how much they're struggling, some trials and tribulations around it. And then you have Gordon in the works, feeling sorry for himself. So Edward turns up and Gordon confides in Edward, feeling like he's lost all respect for the engines. And then we could get some classic Edward wisdom, where he would tell him that you never lost the respect to begin with, and everybody's missing you because they're realising how difficult your job is. And it gives Gordon time to reflect and think, maybe they do respect me. And then you still have the nice resolution at the end. Still a solid episode. This is just what I would have preferred. Number 3, Thomas's Day Off. Written by Shannon Miller, Thomas is given a day off, but a new diesel engine named Dennis acts lazy and gets him to do all of his work. I know this is the Thomas and Friends equivalent of The Boy Who Cried Wolf. It's fine to do these adaptations of stories with this loose premise, as long as the execution of the story is solid. And this execution was solid. Dennis has more character development in one episode than a lot of the characters have throughout the entire hit era of Thomas and Friends. I just wish there was more follow-up with this. I would have loved to have seen if this character change for him stuck and helped flesh out what was already a very well-established character. I think they just looked at this episode and thought, this is a solid episode, it's a banger, we don't need to do any more after it because we introduce a new character and give him a good story. Job's a good one. Number 2, Duncan and the Old Mine. Written by James Mason, Duncan, looking for an adventure, ventures into a disused mine and gets stuck. I've been a fan of this one since I watched it the first time round, and people came back to me and said, how could you like this episode because Duncan isn't in character? I disagree. I think Duncan is totally in character here. He's just not as overly prickish, but his cheeky, adventurous, and mischievous side is still there. He wants to go and have an adventure. He gets in way over his funnel and has to try and think calm and clearly to get out of a situation. You do so much with so little in this episode, because it's just Duncan trapped in an abandoned mine and trying to use his wits to get out. A lot of low lighting, a lot of very close camera angles. This was a very good, solid, story-driven episode. And the number 1 episode of Thomas and Friends, Season 9, is Mighty Mac. Written by Paul Larson, Mighty Mac, a new engine with 2 faces, has a navigation problem when he has to take holidaymakers to the mountains. I think you may need to change the pronoun in that to they because there's 2 of them. I love this double-headed engine. I know there was talks about a similar character being introduced in Season 6, and it never materialised. But if this is what we got instead a few years down the line, pardon the pun, I am more than happy with this. I think this is a very solid episode, very character-driven by Mighty Mac, and it makes you think about how this engine operates on a day-to-day basis. Because they've taken the twin premise, which is established in Thomas and Friends, with Bill and Ben and Donald and Douglas and Ari and Bert, and they flipped the script. It's a twin engine, but they can't leave each other. They're Siamese twin engines. Stuck together, have to go where the other one goes. And obviously you see that struggle throughout this episode, and the story is very well done. And then it makes you think even more. What other stories could they have done? What would happen if it looked like they were going to be split up? Like there was a possibility that, they were going to get the cutter's torch done on them. That would be a good story. Bit dark for this era, but it would be a good story if it was done right. With a good writer behind it, the possibilities are very strong for stories with this engine. Mighty Mac's great, solid episodes, and my number 1 pick for the best episode of Thomas and Friends Season 9. Let me know in the comments how you would rank this season of Thomas and Friends. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, keep on chugging.